What's up, Wesley?
Sorry. Oh, my bad. What's up, Wesley?
Welcome back to the Charleston Wesley podcast, where we make ministry available on the go. I'm Ava, and I'm the Wesley worship intern.
I'm John, and I forgot that we were supposed to say that at the same time. I just genuinely had a brain fart. But I'm
you have a baby
pastor,
in your lap, so it's okay.
And we have, once again, a special guest, James Dempsey, who is quite in the mood to throw a fit. So we'll see how this goes, but he's pretty cool. He's chilling, more or less. He's curious. I think he likes what we're putting down. Before we get into the fun stuff, we need to get to the serious stuff. What superhero would you want to defend you from the Avengers? And if you picked a superhero that's in the Avengers, then they wouldn't be part of the team.
Oh, okay.
See what I'm saying? So if you picked Captain America wouldn't be part of the Avengers. And when I'm saying Avengers, I'm talking about the core group from the first Avengers.
Okay, yeah.
Not everyone.
I mean, I know she's, I don't know if overloved's the right word, but over talked about, but I genuinely do think Scarlet Witch has a pretty insane rack of powers.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have said rack, but she has an insane collection of abilities.
She does. That was a good pick.
Yeah.
You think she could take them all on? I guess she does in the Doctor
Yeah,
Strange
I was going to
movie.
say,
Yeah.
I mean, she seems like she's done the most of that behavior, know, out of all of them.
Yeah. I kind of wonder how Homelander would do.
Oh, that's a good one.
I mean?
I also was thinking about some of the X-Men,
yeah.
potentially, I don't know, Jean Grey's pretty sick.
She's pretty sick. Magneto is pretty powerful.
Yeah.
He would just effectively destroy Iron Man.
And Rogue's really cool, but not all the Avengers have powers.
That's true. I don't think Rogue would.
But she does kill people with her. I forget about that, too.
Yeah.
But she doesn't have, a million arms, so I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean,
I feel like Homelander would do. Superman obviously would always do well.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize
you can
any
jump.
superhero.
You can jump universes. I think if Batman had enough time, he could figure it out.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But yeah, I think Homelander would probably be the most secure.
Yeah, because he doesn't have the moral
he
hold up that Superman has.
That's true. Have you ever heard of The Watchmen?
The Watchmen?
Yeah.
Oh, I think I have, but remind me. I don't remember exactly what it is.
Well, it's it's a parallel universe in the DC universe.
Oh, okay.
And all the heroes are supposed to represent, there's Rorschach who's supposed to be.
They have the black outfits, right?
Well, it's very dark. Watchmen's very gritty and stuff like that. Very good. It's a graphic novel written by Alan Moore, one of my favorite books. But Dr. Manhattan's one of them, the blue dude. And he's literally God. And not literally, but effectively God.
Yeah.
And yeah, he would do a good job.
Yeah.
You can't really do much against him. You should check out the movie. The movie's really good. It's long, but it's good.
I hope people know what we're talking about.
Whatever.
We've gone down a niche path.
Homelander's from The Boys.
Okay.
Which is a show that you probably shouldn't watch.
Don't watch.
And then Dr. Manhattan is from The Watchmen.
You can tie Superman into God, I'm sure, somehow. Into Christianity.
Yeah.
So that might be okay to watch.
I think that there is supposed to be a lot of Christo-centric. He's a man, but he's an alien,
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's the best case scenario. That's your challenge, John. Before I graduate, you have to do a sermon tying Superman and Jesus together.
I was kind of thinking about, this would be dangerous, but to decide the Monday night curriculum, just asking student leaders what their favorite video games are, and then just pulling the theology out from the video games. Or just doing something like that.
Yeah, fun topics.
Yeah.
That could be fun.
Could be. Well, now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about murder and adultery and stealing and lying and coveting.
Boy.
Everyone's favorite. You want to remind the listeners what last week's topic was on?
Yeah, so we talked about a general consensus, a general overview of the Ten Commandments and how we got them and why they're still important today. and how the first general 5 talk about how we love God, and the last general 5 talk about how we love each other.
That's pretty good.
Thanks.
That's pretty good. What were the first 5?
Oh, shoot.
Cheat sheet.
Okay, no other gods before me.
There you go.
No idolatry.
Boom.
Okay. Sabbath.
That's
Honor
one.
your father and mother.
That's another. You skipped the middle one.
Yeah.
OMG.
Okay, give me a hint.
I just did.
Oh, yeah. No Lord's name in vain.
There you go.
No Lord's name
Yeah,
in
there
vain.
you go. Good job. That's the first 5, right?
Yep.
And I'm glad that you included that. Kind of has to do with loving God, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now we're in these last 5, which I'm going to read them. They're a lot shorter than the first 5 from a verse point of view. Exodus chapter 20. James Dempsey's got the hiccups right now, so ignore that. Exodus chapter 20, verse 13. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. There's the last 5. Let's talk about murder, shall we? Why do you think it's a good thing not to murder people?
Okay, so that's like, I feel like the ultimate form of like judgment, you know? And
Ooh.
we gotta leave that one up
Simmer
to
down.
God.
That is
you know?
ooh man, that was a more theological answer than I was expecting. No offense to you, but that was like pretty brilliant.
Oh, okay.
Say
You're
that
surprised.
Say that again?
I don't know, like murder is like the last judgment call you can make on somebody's life down on earth, you know?
How?
So I don't think we should have that much power.
What is murder? Miss
Okay.
likes to study serial killers and all that stuff.
Are we really okay? The taking of life.
Taking of
Oh well, okay. I see your point though. Murder isn't. I guess. I mean, that's where it gets dicey. You think about like military or government or anything where death is involved in your career. I guess murder is.
James Dempsey sounds like he's being murdered.
Yeah. Do you want to help me out? I don't know how to exactly classify what it counts as.
So, oftentimes, especially in the eyes of the law, murder requires premeditation.
Okay.
So, in the eyes of the law, have you ever heard of involuntary manslaughter?
Yes.
Right? Drunk drivers.
Yeah.
They didn't mean to hit someone, but they did and they accidentally killed them. They didn't murder them.
Yeah.
We're just really bringing James Dempsey down. You good? Okay. So, murder requires a premeditated element to it, right? It also requires an intentional element to it. Murder is usually sought or described. We might have to go off air for a second and come back. So, murder. We're back. James Dempsey seems to be doing well now in his pack and play. I was talking about the premeditated element of it, but also murder is typically associated with a not just reasoning, right? There's typically some things that are going on that affect the situation, add some dynamics, and so you kind of did bring up like the great question of like, well, what about the moral ambiguity of like people in the service who have to make the very tough job of like fighting enemies of the country, right? Mm-hmm. And the truth is that we do live in a broken world, and that is a reality of the brokenness of this world. And a lot of people will make the argument of, there's a difference between murder and kill. I think that you can kind of get in a weird place with that if you go too far. But I do think, James Dempsey, my dog, I do think that we should always strive to listen, dear listeners, to that sound. This is the best type of birth control that I can advocate to y'all. This is what happens when we have babies. And so I'm going to go grab the baby. There we go. He just has really strong feelings about murder.
Well, do you think it's like a greater good situation? Like,
yeah, that's a good question.
That's kind of, it's always been justified to me as like...
Yeah. That seems to be the understanding, right? So someone breaks into my house tonight, and it's either I kill him, or he kills me, James Dempsey, and Hannah, right? Ooh.
Yeah.
That kind of makes sense to me, you know?
Right.
Would I be happy about it? Would I try to resolve it? Would I try to maybe wound him first? Yes, but, you know, there is that component. It's a me or them, right?
Yeah.
So, I guess my thoughts on it, and there's people a lot smarter than me who have talked about this, but my thoughts on it are, if you're going to do it, you shouldn't like it, first off. You shouldn't be glorified in it. You should do it, and then you should make sure that it's a good reason that you were the one that survived, right?
Something that a couple of our Citadel friends have even talked to me about was like God's role, and sometimes there's wars in the Bible, and so like there are moments where it's kind of, I guess, ambiguous.
Well, the truth is that death was never part of the plan, right? Death in general, not just killing, but death in general was never part of the original plan.
Yeah.
And so this is a consequence of sin, right? Because of sin, we have wars and killings and stuff like that. So, you know, that's kind of the thing that we have to keep in mind is that God never intended it to be this way. How we made it this way. God is adjusting to the reality of this, right?
Right.
And yeah, in Scripture, you know, there are people that do a lot of things. And it's a little unclear of like how God feels about it. In some places, He's like, "I need you to take this land," and that means you got to drive the people out. And how do you drive people out of land? You kill their men and send their women and children out in the desert, or take them into your own. I will say too that, you know, kind of looking at it from that greater good, the people who do killings end up doing a lot of things that they probably should, right, afterwards.
Yeah.
David kills Goliath, right? Kills a lot of people. David kills a lot of people, and he does a lot of great ministry after that fact. Murder is really upsetting him. So
we might need to move on for his sake.
Let's talk about adultery, something that he's a lot more comfortable with. So, what is adultery?
Cheater.
Cheater. What do you mean?
Cheater, pumpkin eater.
Cheater, pumpkin eater.
Okay. Adultery is when you look lustfully at somebody else that's not who you... Well, okay. You probably shouldn't be looking lustfully at anybody.
That's the question, right?
Yeah. Where's that line? Doing things with other people that you're not supposed to be doing, I guess, in the cheating standpoint.
Okay, so...
Can you save me? I don't want to...
Yeah, I can. So, are you comfortable sharing your middle school crush?
My middle school crush?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be tuning in.
Okay, who's your middle school crush?
Let's go with Chad Cottle.
Chad Cottle. Okay.
Oh gosh, wait, what if he hears this?
Yeah, it's fine. All right, Chad, you've been called out.
It's gone, I promise.
Okay. So, you and Chad are in middle school, and you're dating your boyfriend, girlfriend.
Ooh.
Right. What do we call it adultery if Chad starts talking to other girls while your boyfriend and girlfriend in middle school, right?
Ooh.
Do we?
Yeah.
Do we?
I don't know. It's like child adultery.
It's child adultery. No.
Yeah, that came out wrong.
Yeah.
Mini adultery.
Mini adultery. Okay. So see, there's something wrong about breaking a monogamous pact, right?
Yeah.
There's something wrong. It seems kind of weird to call that adultery, right?
Yeah.
Adultery is like it's sex. It has to deal with sex. Like it has to deal with that, right? So in the, this is where we get a lot of our understanding, like the role of sex in marriage.
I like how he's quiet.
He's listening. He wants to know. And we don't get much from the actual passage. It says, "You shall not commit adultery." But I will say that later in the law, we are given tremendous amounts of detail. Don't sleep with your sister-in-law. Don't sleep with your mother-in-law. Don't sleep with your brother's wife. Don't do any of these, all this stuff. Like, we get a lot of these rules, right? Mm. But the fundamental truth is, when you make a vow, a marital vow specifically, you are saying that you are one flesh. That's like what it means. And it says that in Genesis, they became one flesh, meaning that you are one unit. And when you commit adultery, you have disrupted the whole unit, not just your own good, but you've like really disrupted your partner's life, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why we see some really bad circumstances of people cheating, Isn't that what happened to Sabrina Carpenter's boyfriend? Didn't he cheat on her?
I'm not that in the know, okay. But I'm glad you know about Sabrina Carpenter's dating life.
I think so. Like, it was a big deal. I wouldn't be surprised, yeah. It was a big deal, and people were like freaking out, and it's like, well, yeah, imagine like that in like a marriage of 25 years, and then the wife decides to sleep with someone else. Like, that's a really deep betrayal of covenant and trust and family.
Yeah, because adultery affects more than just the partner, I guess. It affects everybody.
It affects everyone, right? And it continues to affect, right? I mean, like there are obstacles that continue to arise, even if y'all can work it out. It's a hard thing. Mm-hmm. So there's great wisdom in avoiding adultery, right? Now, Jesus gets pretty hardcore with adultery. That was a good timing, James Dempsey. He gets pretty hardcore with adultery at one point, and he says like anyone who like looks lustfully at someone has committed adultery, right? You got to realize that in the passage, he's using hyperbole over and over again, right? Because if you want to make a story seem more impressionable, you say how the fish was 20 feet long, not 20 inches. Yeah. Exaggeration makes something more memorable. Mm-hmm. But you did kind of bring in lust, which I think is something that we should talk about. It is part of kind of our evolutionary element to want to procreate, right? Yeah. And that's like a very just like clinical approach to it. And lust is a drive of that procreation. Mm-hmm. However, we are called to be different than the world. And the world is telling us that we should do those very base evolutionary drives. God is instead saying you should kind of share that experience with someone who you have covenanted with before the eyes of God and before the eyes of God's people, right? Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I have a question. Can you look lustfully at your like husband or wife, or is that like not a thing?
Yeah, I don't think so. Okay. I mean, like
that's just attraction. Yeah, that's different.
Yeah. I mean, like
lust is specifically negative.
Well, lust implies like a forbiddenness, right? Yeah. But there is no forbiddenness within the confines of marriage in that sense, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But even in this conversation, we've kind of like unveiled like the trickiness that comes up in these types of dynamics, and so the wisdom prevails. You should just kind of avoid that altogether to make your life a little bit easier, right?
So basically, like you're saying, like no adultery means no sex cheating, but other forms of cheating might lead to sex cheating. So that's why it's all kind of bad.
Yeah, well, and some people, I've heard like the phrase like emotional adultery or something like that. Yeah. Which I can imagine, I can empathize with, and like, if you're living out the marital relationship outside of your marriage, I think there's another, right? Mm-hmm. But here's where this commandment gets real interesting. Obviously, avoiding adultery allows you to love your neighbor better, right? Because you're not sleeping with your neighbor's wife. Well, and that's the other thing about adultery is if you're single and you sleep with your neighbor's husband, you are still committing adultery, right? It has nothing to do with your marital status. It has everything to do with disrupting a marital status. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But bear with me real quick. There's Christ, and then there's Christ's bride. Do you know who Christ's bride is?
The church?
The church, which you are a member of, right?
Right.
When you make marital vows, there is this kind of understanding of like you won't commit adultery, which means that you're not going to live out that marital relationship with other things, right? There's a lot of things that we commit adultery on in our marital vow to Christ.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
I mean, think about it. Like, you know, we are searching for things that we get from Christ, but we're searching for it outside of Christ, right? We want to feel better, so there's people who chronically drink or do drugs or gamble or do any of the other things that have those dopamine effects. We have purpose from Christ, and yet we find these people who are workaholics who are driving themselves, working themselves into the grave. We have joy from Christ, and yet we have a really weird habit of party culture, which is like one of the most sad lifestyles that I can imagine. Because all you do is you just jump around in a dark room, have to yell at people, and then you feel terrible the next morning. And the only way that you feel better is to drink again, because that's the best way to deal with a hangover. Pro tip. So, we commit adultery a lot with Christ, and that's a weird way to look at it, but I think it's a helpful way to look at it.
Yeah.
Questions?
No, that makes sense.
All right, stealing. Why do you think it's a bad thing to steal?
It would hurt my feelings if somebody took something.
It would hurt your feelings.
Because, I don't know, I guess people work hard for what they have, so taking the easy way out. I think if everyone's stealing everything, then that's greedy,
Sure.
What's left for the people that choose not to steal?
Sure. I mean, yeah, but theft also deprives people of something, right?
Right.
And back then, we're talking about a whole bunch of people who were living in the wilderness, in the desert. A million people wandering around with cows. I mean, they don't have TVs to steal and stuff like that. Think about the things that they could steal from each other. I mean, they're stealing things that are livelihood.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's where it's hard.
If you stole my cow, my family might starve.
Yeah, which I think is a hard thing to think about, because I have heard, at least in my own life, and I've heard situations of people stealing where they really needed what they stole, and so it's kind of the twofold thing of why are people stealing too? I think it's pretty deep.
Sure. So in that, right, which is in that dichotomy, right? Let's say you stole my cow because your family would have starved otherwise. Mm-hmm. My question is, which is the greater sin? The fact that I let your family get to that point, or the fact that you stole my cow?
Yeah. Ooh.
Right? I mean, there's a truth there.
It's back into loving your neighbor, I think. Too.
Oh, absolutely, right? We have to live in community and relationship with people to where you don't need to steal anything, right?
Right.
You shouldn't have to steal my iPad to get your education done, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead, you should come to me and be like, damn, John, ooh, sorry. Darn, John, I am really down and out, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to complete my education. And then I'd be like, you know what? I have an iPad that I just don't use right now. How do you use it for the semester? There are ways around theft, right? But stealing also, it takes from someone what God gave them, right? Especially when you're living in the lifestyle that they were living back then. Everything they got was from God, and ultimately everything that we get is from God. But back then, God would literally send food every morning. So, yeah, theft is like a really dangerous thing. And it's one of those dopamine high things. I mean, there's people who have like addictions to thievery.
Kleptomania, I think.
Yeah,
is the
shoplifting,
word.
right? That's a big one. I knew a guy. He was when I was in college. I went to Bonnaroo with him. He's a really awesome dude. One of my favorite human beings. But like, we were just looking at like some of the merchants, and he literally just like ripped a pair of pants off of the hanger and shoved it down his pants, and then walked off. And I was like talking with him afterwards, and he was just like, "Yeah, man, I don't know why I do it. I just do it. Like I just do it at like every place I go."
Interesting.
And it was sad, you know. It's just like he didn't even know why, but that wasn't fair to the vendor, and you know, I that put me in a weird space because I didn't say anything, and you know, it just is kind of theft is weird. It complicates things.
Yeah, on that note, just now that I'm thinking about it, if you're a bystander to any of those things, how does that impact Ten Commandments? Like, if you're a bystander and no adultery is going on, is that a rule?
You're asking what
do you do if you see someone stealing? Do you?
What's the cost benefit to being a snitch?
Yeah, it feels wrong, you know. Like,
well, if you see someone get murdered and you don't tell anyone,
right?
That's pretty bad.
Okay.
Right? You know, I was talking with someone recently, and I was saying, like, you know, what do I do with college students? Do I point out that they're living a life that maybe isn't what God wants them to live? Or do I go up to them and I say, "Hey, what's going on? And why do you feel like you have to steal these things?" Right?
Yeah, showing kindness instead of judgment. I could see that.
And offering grace, and there's accountability with it, right? But I do think there's always merit in understanding the storm, right? That in someone's life before just judging them as a mess. It may be helpful to know what's caused them to be a mess, right? I do think there's some wisdom in like staying in your own lane, you know. Other people's business is other people's business. But yeah, in the case of like adultery, that's tough with y'all's friends and stuff, because it's like, oh, I like you both, but you're really doing one friend wrong here.
It might be a situational thing too.
It's a very situational thing, and to be honest, I don't know what to tell you with that one. Because it's so situational. I think that there's grace. I do think that the longer that you sit on something, the more likely someone will be angry at you for sitting on it. And that's just kind of a wisdom thing there.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I think that was my big question for the stealing section.
All right. No lying. Is that what it says?
Yeah.
Nope. It says don't give false testimony against your neighbor.
Okay.
That's a weird word, isn't it?
False testimony?
What does that make you think of?
You know, church testimony a little bit, like.
A little bit.
So false, I don't know, lying, like, I've always heard thou shalt not lie. I think I've never really realized that there were more words involved.
Well, it doesn't say anything about lying. It just says give false testimony. So you give testimonies in church. Where else do you give testimonies?
Court systems.
Court, right. You ever heard of perjury?
Yeah,
lying
that's
under
a
oath?
big no-no.
That's what this is.
Oh.
Right?
Now, we still can't lie, but like...
Well, yeah, but this is really talking about like court systems. Because like some people will be like, well, what about the white lie that makes people feel better and stuff like that? And like, it's really not what this is getting into. I think there's wisdom in being an honest person, right? And I think that that's a better way of life. But this is literally a legal concept. You can't sue me saying that I stole your cow when I just never did. Like,
yeah.
And why would God care about that? Because if you say that I stole, and you're saying it in court, and everything in court is supposed to be like upheld by the law, then you are dishonoring me, and all of a sudden now I'm cast as a thief. And this was a big deal for this legal system that they had. I mean, It was all based off of trials. That's one thing that no one ever talks about. Is that all of these commandments and stuff, if you broke them, you went on trial. And it wasn't just like a slap on the wrist of just being like, oh my goodness, you like cheated on your wife. Don't do that again. It was like, no, it was like a public thing where you and whoever you cheated on and the wife would all be put in front of people. And in some cases, they were killed. It was a big deal, like, to do these things. So yeah. But the question that I have for you is, do you think it's bad if Hannah were to come to me and say, John, do I look not pretty in this?
And you're saying she actually doesn't? Like what?
Well, you see what I'm saying? Like what is the greater good?
I don't know. Yeah, there's definitely been a new spin on it, because I genuinely always thought it was thou shalt not lie. Like, that's what and it's probably, they probably teach it to us that way growing up, because it's easy to remember, you know?
Yeah.
And there's good reasons to learn not to lie.
Yeah.
But yeah,
when you get into translation will say that.
When you get to the intricacies, yeah, that's tough. Like, another one is, like, if you're planning a surprise party for someone, you know? If they ask, like, are we doing anything this Friday? No. Like, ugh.
Yeah, right?
Greater good. It's kind of like the murder one.
It's kind of like the murder one. It's very weird, right? It's almost like this law is not sufficient, right? And that a new revision of it had to have been made later.
I was going to say, it'd be awesome we could just, like, ask God, but, like, I don't know. There'd be a lot of questions.
Well, which is more complicated, these 10 laws or the 2 laws, love your God and love your neighbor?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's where we really need to kind of guide ourselves, is like, is me telling Hannah that she looks like a dumpster fire, is that really loving her? You know?
Yeah.
Is that helping her?
Oh, I see. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
I don't know, you know? But, going on court and swearing under oath and then saying lies about Hannah, that's definitely not loving her, right?
Mm-hmm.
So something to think about there.
Neat.
And then finally, coveting.
I don't know what this word means.
Well, listen to what it says again. It says, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, their wife, their male or female servant, their ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor.
Well, see, it sounds like take, but, like, I would put that with stealing or adultery, you know? Like.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what is the big difference?
Well, can't really steal a house.
Is it desiring?
Yeah.
Coveting is desiring.
But it's in envy. It's in this frustration that your neighbor has what you don't, right? So
it's not a physical. It's like an emotional thing.
Yeah, it's this frustration that you don't have what they have, right? And I think this is huge for college kids, right?
Yeah.
I know tons of students who feel distraught that their friends are in relationships and they're not, right? I know college students who are frustrated that they have a classmate that just doesn't study at all and just kills it on the exam every single time. And then I know some people who are frustrated that, especially like the Citadel with the rank systems, like athletes can have this privilege but we can't, or seniors can do this but knobs can't. It's all coveting, right? And it's nasty and it's dangerous, because what happens when you start to get fixated on what other people have?
It's just hard to, like, be friends and focus on the good when you're around them. You just focus on, like, the negative.
Yes, and if you're worried about what other people have.
Oh, you're not being thankful for what you have.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, if I was frustrated that, like, perfect example, Hannah's sister now has 2 babies and they have a house, right? Yeah. And if I was frustrated that they had 2 babies, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, it just stinks that I only have the one. Like, that just is the worst thing. And it's like, no, like, this kid's awesome. And, like, I love him. And, like, I'm enjoying him. You know what I'm saying? And I was talking about this with Hannah, who's a very wise woman. And she quoted someone who said, comparison is the thief of joy. You know who said that?
No, but it's a good quote, yeah.
Right? And this is what this is getting at, is coveting is comparison. And I think that's a brutal thing for college students. Also, and we kind of talked about this too, there's like this, like, weird facade covet that a lot of students have, where they think they know what the college experience is, and they covet that because they feel like they're not getting it, when in reality, that is actually just not a sustainable college experience. So yeah, coveting's interesting. Should be noted too, I think one of the reasons that you got a little confused is that it says something about neighbors' wives, like you can't covet your neighbor's wife.
Yeah.
The sad reality is that women were property in the eyes of this law.
Yeah, that had some context.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is not right. But that is the situation, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Does that clarify?
Yeah, for sure.
So we're not supposed to murder. We're not supposed to adulterate. Not supposed to steal. Not supposed to lie. Not supposed to covet. Which of these do you think you're really knocking out of the park? You killed anyone lately?
I was gonna say murder. I'm pretty good at. You know. No, I'm pretty good at not murdering.
That's good. That's the side that you want to be on.
Right. Do you feel similarly?
Sometimes I want to murder.
Okay. I was gonna say, is the desire there? Cause I don't know.
Every once in a while, I'll just be like Kevin Lopez, bro. Oh. That was for him. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm pretty good at not killing people. I feel like I'm pretty good at not committing adultery.
Yeah.
And that stuff. What do you feel like you're struggling with?
Coveting. As soon as you finally explained it, I was like, that seems like the easiest one to fall trapped into, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I go through one day without being jealous of something, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we live in a world where we're hyper aware of everyone else's lives.
That too.
I mean, back then, you know, what was happening in the tent next door was what was happening in the tent next door. You didn't get the prime time play-by-play, you know what I mean? Like, it was easier back then, I think, but still a challenge. I think I struggle with that all the time. Oh my goodness. When I see another campus ministry post on Facebook, and I'm like, what? They were able to do 6 songs and we only did 4? You know, like, I'm just like distraught.
Yeah.
Or when I find out that they fundraised $20,000 when I only fundraised $18, you know?
Yeah.
And it's, you know, what did we just say? Like, that brings me to a place where I'm not happy with the fact that, like, we got to worship with 4 songs, and we have $18,000, you know. Mm-hmm. But there are people who really struggle. I mean, you know, there's like serial killers and murderers, and like they obviously struggle with this. There are serial adulterers who just have this like struggle. I mean, there's no other way to put it. We talked about, you know, people who have kleptomania, which I'm not sure if that's the proper term or not anymore. I can see that being like a derogative. This is the mania, isn't it? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. But, I mean, there's some people that have that. But also, like, there are some people who really can't help but lie all the time. You know what I mean? And that's a sad thing. Because then they just, like, they seemingly can't tell the truth. And then, like we said, I think everyone's struggling with coveting. Especially in this hyper publicized world. So, what are you going to do this week to help you continue to not murder people, but then also maybe work on some of the other things?
2 things I thought of. One is on the lying note, there are a lot of these. I think once you start doing the smaller stuff, that's when it snowballs. And we were kind of talking about that, how it doesn't exactly say lying, but maybe the small lies make it easier, you know? And so no white lies would be maybe a good rule to follow. And also the coveting thing, it reminds me of when we had Brendan Serling on here for the complaining episode, and he challenged everyone, like, go 5 hours, you know, or just whatever. So maybe I'll try that. To do a challenge with myself. I'll reward myself with some, like, boba or something if I can do it. Or at least being aware of me doing it. Like, if I do it, fine. That, you know, sometimes you can't help your thoughts, but telling myself, hey, that's not the right way to think.
Yeah, well, and you know, when I say, like, there's grace for it, it's like, there's grace for it, and I expect you to do something with it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, like, you can register that it's happening, and then also just be like, okay, well, I'm going to try. And this is the hard challenge. I had to do this over paternity leave. You can delete those apps.
Oh.
You can delete those apps, and it'll make your life easier.
Okay.
It's wild how much happier I am, and how much, like, better sleep I get because I'm just not. I'm not seeing what FCA and BC are doing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the only thing I'm seeing is what I see at Wesley. So
yeah. Are you gonna do any small changes this week?
I think I'm gonna try not to murder anyone.
That's a good one.
But interestingly, I'm gonna really try to extend some grace to the people that I know are struggling with these things, like adultery or lust or chronic lust. People who struggle with shoplifting and things like that and lying. Like, I want to extend more grace to them. So I'm going to take it in a different route.
Neat.
So.
Well, if you don't have anything else, I
good.
think that's what's up with the 10 Commandments Part 2.
Woo!
If you guys have any questions, please reach out at our email, wuw@wesleychs.org. And also, don't forget to like or follow on whatever platform you're listening to.
If you want to learn more about the Wesley Foundation, you can go to our website, wesleychs.org, or check us out on Instagram and Facebook. And we're going to try and pray. God, thank you for this time. Thank you for this space. Thank you for the opportunity to learn more about your word and know how to love others better. We joke, but the truth is that scary things like murder and adultery and theft and lying and coveting exist. We ask that you help us to navigate this world with this brokenness in it, extend grace to those trying situations, and just help us to better know our role in ministering to those who are struggling with these 5. We love you, we praise you, it's in your name we pray. Amen. Catch you next week.